What a weekend. Do you know, after Aston Villa and my family, I think one of the greatest joys in my life is cooking in my own kitchen. And it was Canadian Thanksgiving this past weekend, and I got to tell you, I was well chuffed with the results. Because you do this year over year, you learn from your mistakes until one year it just all comes together. And I was in a relatively good mood on Sunday when I was cooking up a storm, because Aston Villa is now at a state where we can legitimately be disappointed about only coming away from a game like that with a point. And this was a huge game on four fronts. Obviously, the respective table positions made it big. The momentum both teams wanted to continue from the previous week. Obviously, the fact it's a derby matters. I mean, I think it's bigger for them than it is for us, but it doesn't matter. Don't ever take for granted the incredible fact that three founding members of top flight football are within, a 45-minute drive from one another? That is why football in England is amazing. But also there's the recent form. Since returning to the Premier League, Aston Villa has won but one game against Wolves, which is baffling, and that didn't change. So many talking points, let's get into it. Wolves 1, Aston Villa 1. Before we get into the match, news broke on Monday that Johan Lange has left Aston Villa to take up the Tottenham Hotspur technical director's job. And if I'm being honest, I thought this was inevitable when Unai Emery arrived, and then when Monchi came aboard and he was reshuffled, it really felt like it was just a matter of time. But the club respected him so much that they wanted to give him an opportunity in another role rather than just discarding him. But knowing his value and his contributions to our club was difficult, because I always found his role kind of vague. Like, how much input did he have on player signings? Because Steven Gerrard and Dean Smith both brought players in, and there were times when it felt like Christian Purslow had the final authority on any and all signings. And because he was largely numbers driven, well, we have no access to the criteria or the process that would allow us to make an informed decision on whether he was effective at his job or not. My impression of Lange was that he was always just sort of a background resource, using analytics and data to support footballing decisions, which is why I found it so painfully awkward and somewhat hilarious that he was included in the Steven Gerrard introductory media conference with Christian Purslow. I mean, he was so uncomfortable, he could barely spit out words to speak. And how much influence did he actually have on that hire? Only the people within the four walls will ever know. But how much influence did he have on any signing, for that matter? I mean, I would imagine that he had a big role to play in the capture of John Duran, because that process would have had to have started long before Unai Emery arrived. But supposedly, Lange was also the one who pushed really hard for Morgan Sanson. There's two examples. And that signing represented a bit of a disconnect between football, recruitment, scouting, and the management team at the time. I love our structure now, footballing-wise. It is clear Monchi is at the top, working in lockstep harmony with Unai Emery at the first-team level, which is critical for success. And I'll be very curious to see what happens now with the academy side of the business, because it's been very successful for Villa from a resources and value perspective. But what is the goal? Are they trying to get first-teamers out of that? Or are they just trying to build up assets to sell on, kind of like they did in the summer? Welcome officially to the Holy Trinity show, where we break down the three key moments or issues that defined Wolves 1, Villa 1. A first draw of this season, and only the fifth draw since Unai joined. All of them 1-1, and all but one at home, and that home draw was against Wolves. Let's start things off with the key numbers, and I wanted to center in on the center-back accurate long balls. We were wasteful in front of goal. When you look at the amount of attempts it took to hit the target, that is way, way off. Now, in Carlos and Torres, we have center backs who carry an accurate long ball threat. The percentage isn't really what's important. It's the chances they create. Now, on the day, they combined for 4 of 12 accurate long balls. That's 33%. 1 every 3. That's okay. They also combined for 9 passes into the final third, which is a big reason why I think we signed them. But I'm telling you, it is coming. Torres or Carlos is going to knock a ball over the top that beats the trap and sends Ollie Watkins or Moussa Diaby or somebody else on a breakaway to score. It's coming. I found this a very absorbing contest, and it was a shame that we were wasteful in front of goal, which you could see in our stats. We just didn't hit the target enough, especially the early ones too, because we had scored early when we were kind of on top in those first 10 minutes or so. Might have felt very different for the home crowd and the home team. Matt Cash had a great chance too. What a ball across by John McGinn. And I put this down to, can you put it anywhere else on the target? And good goalkeeping from Jose Sa, who seems to love playing against us for whatever reason. But as this game went on, and especially when Wolves was reduced to 10 men, I started getting December 2020 vibes. You remember that game? Late in it, John McGinn earns a penalty, and that's the only time we've defeated Wolves since returning to the Premier League. So my hunch turned out to be correct regarding the fitness status of both Boubacar Kamara and Moussa Diaby, and I'm glad that Unai Emery is playing the game a little bit here and being cagey or at least vague with his injury disclosures, which is a common practice here in North America. And I never understand why it's such an open book sometimes in England, because why help your opponent prepare? But this lineup was designed to try and nullify Pedro Neto on the Wolves' right by loading up our left with, among others, Pau Torres, Luca Dean, and John McGinn. Of course, it didn't come off in the end, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. But, boy, if you're a Wolves fan, you better hope that Pedro Neto stays fit for the remainder of the season, or he doesn't decide to bolt in January, because you take him out of that lineup and, oof, it's a bit slim pickings on the attack front. You would have never guessed that Wolves probably would have been thrilled to cling on to a point the way the game played out based on Gary O'Neill's post-match comments and the way he behaved at the full-time whistle, which irritated me because I was willing to give this guy some credit after the win over Manchester City last weekend. But when you go and you make comments about the other team and throw shade at how they did or didn't press or how one of their players should have been sent off, and then the full-time handshake situation, I'm sorry, that tells me you are a dime a dozen manager who is never going to coach a bigger club than the one he's coaching now. And I realize that the Chinese owners of Wolves are strip mining it bare for whatever reason and not putting resources back. And that's the reason why Julian Lopetegui left. He wasn't getting support in recruitment, and that's why they hired Gary O'Neill. He's cheap and he's available because he was fired from Bournemouth despite keeping them in the Premier League. And frankly, I loved how Unai Emery dealt with that post-whistle handshake situation. What's the expression for piss off, you little bitch in Spanish? Positive issue. Nicolo Zaniolo continues to establish himself and evolve week upon week, and his numbers in terms of retaining the ball keep getting better. In this one, 3 of 5 ground duels won. That's decent. He earned 3 fouls, one of which condemned Mario Lemina to the showers, and he also recovered the ball twice. And this is despite the fact that when Leon Bailey came on, he was pushed wide left again, which is where I think he's easier to pin. He came on for Diaby and played behind Ollie Watkins more centrally, which is what I think he prefers. We'll talk about his late chance a little bit later on, but now he's with Italy. He seems to be happy, and with every training session, with every game, with every little morsel of success, he's going to gain confidence, and he's going to become an impactful player for us. I believe it. It's just a matter of time, and he's got the best teacher you could possibly have to help him. Feel-good issue. Diego Carlos got another 90 minutes, this time of Premier League action under his belt. And people forget he is only now just starting to get up to speed in the Premier League. You could make the argument that he's behind Pau Torres in that regard. And it was against Wolves last year in this fixture where he returned from injury as a substitute. He's got a lot of great qualities. I mean, the man is a specimen. And he could play the long ball. He tried a couple of Hail Marys. He didn't connect, as I mentioned in the numbers, but that is coming. What he needs now, and the same can be said for Pau Torres, is to finish the headed chances that come his way from corners, because both of them had a couple of really good looks at goal from corners. If he and Torres could chip in with a goal, even just once a month, imagine the difference that might make in the differential between points gained and lost. Big issue, our captain was influential again, sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in a room for improvement type way, and I'm referring specifically to the two first half chances John McGinn had from range. The first one I felt was a bit on the hopeful side, but when you watch it back, he came way closer than I had originally thought. But it's the second one where he will likely be far more demanding of himself, and I know Unai Emery spun away in frustration that McGinn didn't at least hit the target and test Jose Sa, because we've seen the meatball score from those kinds of ranges. And I'm willing to fully forgive our captain, because this could come down to the fact he went the distance against Brighton, in which he was heavily involved, obviously involved very late in a taxing game the following Thursday. Perhaps there is a little bit of mental and physical fatigue starting to come in, and I certainly hope he goes through this Scotland call-up unscathed. I'm touching wood as I speak, because if it's not Douglas Luiz, John McGinn has probably been one of our most important players this season. And then there was the ongoing battle with Craig Dawson, who we were heavily linked with apparently last year, around about the time that Jan Benderak joined us from Southampton on loan. Seasoned campaigner, so a good adversary. And wouldn't you have loved for John McGinn to have been mic'd up for those exchanges? Of course, you would have needed subtitles probably, and definitely a censor, but those made me nervous because McGinn, of course, was on the early yellow. What a great week for our captain. Heavily involved in the Brighton win, and of course, in the Thursday Europa Conference League victory as well. And to hear Unai Emery singing his praises this week the way he did was almost surreal, given the ups and downs during the Smith and Gerrard eras. You know who's a great pundit who was on the Matchday Live coverage this week? Cesc Fabregas. Wow, what an insightful and articulate guy. And one of the things that he said, there's no such thing as a player who's not good enough. There just isn't the right coach for that player. And I don't think any player in our entire squad exemplifies the growth and change as much as John McGinn under Unai Emery. Major moment, the Ollie Watkins penalty incident. And my initial gut reaction when I saw the situation in the moment was, geez, Ollie, if you just square that to your left first time, it's a tap-in at the edge of the six. And then I reviewed it again, and upon second thought, that pass might not have even been on. He was in a great area to shoot, and while in the process of winding up to shoot, he was shoved in the back, imbalanced, and hits the side netting. Wolves fans will say, well, we should have had a penalty in the 70th minute or so when Pedro Neto tumbled over in our box, but in comparing the two incidents, there is nothing there. I mean, he had nowhere to go, he wasn't touched barely, and he tumbles over. Ollie Watkins was in a prime shooting position and was about to do so when he was imbalanced with a shove. And had the referee pointed to the spot, I simply cannot see how or where VAR would have overturned it. And this is where I wonder, what were they thinking in Stockley Park, and why I agree with Neil Warnock's idea, as I have on this show before. Put ex-pros in the VAR booths at Stockley Park to provide different real game perspectives from players. Interesting that Eric Dyer tweeted, "That's a penalty." Do you know why? He understands the game because he's played the game. He understands the situations, the motivations, the distances, the balance, and all of it. Do you know who was missing from this match? Paul Handsaker from 24/7 Services, which is kind of a shame because he was on this great 3-game watching the Villa live with his family winning streak. And with Paul's connections, I was half expecting to turn on the TV and see him at Molineux sitting next to Robert Plant. And by the way, isn't it a little bit depressing that one of the most legendary and greatest voices in the history of rock and roll is a Wolves fan? Well, then again, I suppose not everybody can be chosen. Thank goodness Paul was, and that I got to meet him. This was something I was extremely thankful for this Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, our partnership. And when you engage with 24/7 Services to do work either at your commercial or business property or your recreational property or at home, you're helping to validate this partnership of ours, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. Big moment number 3, the 1-0 goal. Unai Emery was absolutely furious about this goal, so much so that he was still rooted to his seat in the dugout, scowling, even after Pau Torres had equalized just a couple of minutes later. And the route to victory at Molineux would have been quite simple. It would have started with a clean sheet, ideally, and that would have been aided by denying Pedro Neto the ability to operate and work on the Wolves' right, which is why I believe Emery went with Torres, Dean, and McGinn on that side of the park. But the problem started long before the ball even got into our penalty box, and unfortunately and surprisingly, it actually started with Douglas Luiz. Douglas Luiz has been brilliant for us and is probably our MVP to this point of the season. And I thought actually he made the difference on Thursday when he came on after halftime, because now suddenly we had a dribbling threat, a player who could carry it through the very stout Mostar lines. He's been taxed, though, because his position is demanding, and I wonder if that had a role on the 1-0 goal, because he was virtually uncontested and he just gave the ball away with options and time. It was very unusual for our Brazilian baller. Now, did Aston Villa do all the right things in their defensive third after the ball was turned over? Well, no. Pau Torres is not going to win a foot race. He's not going to lunge in and try to make a tackle. Luka Dean's a little unfortunate. The ball went through his legs, and then Konza was late to Huang. But to truly analyze a goal, you can't just look at the last 5 seconds of it. You have to go right back to the beginning where it started. Big moment number 2, the 1-1 goal. That sinking feeling, which had become so familiar from recent trips to Molineux, hadn't even, sunk in yet before Villa cancelled out Neto's goal, which allows me to use another one of the top drawer sayings from football's cliche cupboard, which is, you are most vulnerable in the moments after you score. Maybe this is why Gary O'Neill acted like such a gigantic baby after this game, because his team did what it needed to do to win this game: score first. And they conceded less than 2 minutes after. This was a very difficult game for Ollie Watkins, his first since officially signing a contract extension with Aston Villa, which, by the way, he would have had to have known through his agent that they were down to the final legalese crossing of T's and dotting of I's, at least before Brighton and maybe as far back as Chelsea, which kind of puts those two performances into a different context, because I get the feeling that Ollie Watkins is the consummate family man who wants to take care of his family for the long term. So to get this near term 5 years locked up and sorted out, that's got to be a great feeling. I mean, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. Somebody commits to you for 5 years financially. That's a major confidence boost. But this was a tough first half for him. He was disconnected and starved of service. He created a great chance all on his own that forced a brilliant save out of Sa, frankly, that looked like it was labeled. So I had to do a double take when on the Pau Torres goal, it was Ollie Watkins who feathered that ball over, left-footed no less, to set it up for the Spaniard, having missed a clear-cut header in the first half from a corner, and then losing the foot race to Pedro Neto that ultimately led to the opening goal. I'm sure our big Spanish summer signing would have been delighted to latch onto that cross and make good connection back across goal, neatly into the corner. I loved the joy and enthusiasm of the celebration, which just seemed so genuine from a guy who I think is getting better week upon week. And you know, pure footballers like Pau Torres, they understand the meaning and the nature of derbies. His would have been Valencia in the past, so I think that made this extra sweet. And you know, he's not a guy who's going to win foot races against wingers or strikers. He'd rather step in and pinch the ball before it even gets to that stage, or contribute maybe with a beautiful penetrating ball into the front third, or by splitting two defenders with a nice through ball. But to contribute with a goal in this way is so excellent, such a great confidence booster for him, and let's hope it's the first of many from him. And the number one big moments that defined Wolves 1, Villa 1, the added time chances. The board goes up 12 additional minutes at a time when I felt Villa found a second wind. Then Lamina gets dumped with 8 minutes to go, and now visions of Anwar El Ghazi's penalty winner in 2020 start coming to mind. And we created 3 incredible opportunities. We were that close from second place, smashing and grabbing 3 points and saying, bring on David Moyes' mob after the international break. And where my Aston Villa supporter psyche has changed since Unai Emery came aboard is now I was 100% expecting to go on and win that game and not have the I'll bite your arm off for a pointed Molyneux mentality of the past. And with every chance, instead of thinking, well, that has to be our last chance, no, the Villa Mostar spirit carried on to create 2 more even better chances in the end. The first was Zaniolo's, and frankly, he does absolutely everything right except angle his boot 15 degrees. That's probably the margin and the difference. 15 degrees of angling his right boot to the left, and he snuggles that ball into the corner for his first Aston Villa goal. And that wasn't even as good a chance as the next one, which, with the greatest of respect to our man Ezri, fell to the wrong guy. The patience and control that we showed in the build-up to this opportunity, first with Luiz and then to the oh-so-exquisite in the front third, Luca Dean. I mean, at some point recently, Luca Dean must have come to the realization that despite links to other clubs elsewhere and the fact that he's played for Lille and PSG and even Barcelona, Aston Villa is the best fit for him and his career right now. The best chance for growth, for opportunity of success, all of it. And he lays it on an absolute platter in the heart of the box. And if that's Douglas Luiz or John McGinn or Ollie Watkins or Leon Bailey or Nicolo Zaniolo, all players who will have seen that picture before and had experience in coming in late to that ball, it's 1, 2, thank you very much, 3 points. And again, what's the difference in the angle of the foot? 10 degrees, 15, maybe 20. And just when we thought that was going to be our best chance of stoppage time, and with the referee somehow playing on, Ollie Watkins connects with a header and directs it down off the post and out. How many degrees of neck movement would that have been from a last-second game-winning goal? Again, 10, 15, couldn't have been much. And my impression of Ollie Watkins has always been he is a dedicated professional, maybe on the verge of being a perfectionist. Not to the degree of David Beckham, by the way, if you've watched that series. His OCD is off the charts. I think that all comes down to what happened in 1998. Really, it is a fantastic series. But regardless, I sometimes think of Ollie Watkins, are you only satisfied if the ball goes posted in or crossbar and down? Because it seems like he's always aiming for that. And with that chance in mind, I'm certain he is going to ask for some extras at Bodymore Heath in the headed finishing department when he returns from England duty. And by the way, good luck to him while representing the Three Lions. And that's football. razor-fine margins and moments that could be the difference between second and fifth as we approach the quarter pole of the Premier League season, and on a weekend where there were some very favorable results elsewhere involving the top five. Lots of draws between them. Let's remember how this game plays out when Wolves come to Villa Park on March 30th, a match I intend on being at live. And anytime you could take 4 points or more from a Premier League opponent, you take it. And if you do that enough times, you're in the Champions League. What a great shot and what a great moment. We call this the hero shot as we review the categories that we follow throughout the season. And frankly, not a lot, if anything, has changed, perhaps with the exception of gaining a point away from home, but everything else, no set pieces, no penalties, no Watkins-Diaby goals. Wolves is not a bottom six side yet. We didn't score first, and we didn't keep a clean sheet. Similarly to Wolves, Aston Villa have had a very difficult time taking points off West Ham United over recent seasons, and they, along with Tottenham Hotspur, appear to be the surprise packages of this Premier League season, only because West Ham had a bit of a blip last year as they were trying to navigate the Europa Conference League. This year, though, Jared Bowen has been absolutely on fire, just penned a contract extension like Ollie Watkins with England now. Thomas Souček looks like the Thomas Souček from 2 and 3 seasons ago. Such an unusual weapon to have, this big guy in midfield who could be physical and win duels, but then go and score goals. I think they've upgraded in goal with Areola. Lucas Paquetá has fully settled and integrated with West Ham, and they've made a very interesting pickup from Ajax in the form of Mohamed Kudus, who scored a spectacular 89th minute worldie last weekend against Newcastle. But arguably the most intriguing personnel story from this game might be another Villa killer. James Ward-Prowse has different tools from Declan Rice, especially the scary dead ball stuff. But those two players do have one thing in common, and that is a ridiculous engine. And when you put better players around Ward-Prowse, he's going to be better, and he has a good scoring record against us. West Ham, I think, reinvested the Rice money very wisely. And that's why, like us, I think they are legitimately going to try and disrupt the establishment. And based on the fact that we're now neighbors in the table, this sets up as a really big game post-international break. The last time we beat West Ham was 2015, 1-0 at Villa Park. And I'm not saying this is our Arsenal beating Manchester City moment potentially, but there are enough players still around in our squad that have gone through a number of these games that will all know the significance of it, and they'll know the drill. We have not had success against the Irons. And last year, the loss at home to West Ham for me was my realization that Gerrard was the wrong guy for this club, and we just couldn't hold on to the lead when we went down to the game in London. Many people have asked me privately about my opinions on the matters that are happening off the field at Villa Park these days, and I'm just going to start piecing that together now and hopefully have the show out either this weekend or at least within the week. And like the on-field revolution that is occurring under Unai Emery right now, Aston Villa is going through a major cultural and branding shift off the park in the commercial and business development area, and not many people are very happy at the moment. In fact, a lot of feathers are being ruffled. I'll talk about those issues. But if you'll excuse me, I have a turkey and stuffing sandwich to make. So until the next time, be well, and as always, up the mighty Villa.